Tired of struggling to stick to your goals? Reverse psychology might be the answer you've been searching for. What if the key to better self-discipline wasn't about pushing yourself harder, but actually about tricking your mind? Discover the surprising power of reverse psychology and transform your relationship with your goals. Picture this: you're lying in bed, it's late, and you promised yourself you'd get up early to go for a run. But your brain's already crafting 100 reasons why you absolutely shouldn't. The blanket is warm, the floor is cold, your shoes are definitely too far away. You tell yourself, I have to get up, and somehow that makes you want to stay put even more. Here's the twist: you probably won't know this, but the moment you try to force yourself into discipline with pure willpower, your brain starts pushing back. That rebellious streak is built in. It's not laziness. It's psychology. And it's exactly why reverse psychology can work so well. You're not weak, you're wired for resistance. Before you settle in, feel free to like the video if it brought you a little peace, and if you'd like to join us again, we'd love to have you back. Subscribe when you're ready. No pressure, just rest. Share something if you feel like it. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together. So, why does self-discipline fail so often? Why is it that even with the best intentions, the cleanest calendar, and the loudest alarm clock, you still find yourself scrolling Instagram instead of doing yoga, binge-watching instead of finishing that report? Well, part of the answer is in how we define discipline in the first place. You've probably been told that discipline is about control. Firm, tight, don't flinch control. But here's the psychological wrinkle: too much control triggers a backlash. The more tightly you grip the reins, the more your inner horse wants to bolt. This is known as psychological reactance, and it's at the very core of why we self-sabotage. The more you tell yourself you must, the more some secret part of you whispers, "Oh yeah? Watch me not." In a 2009 study from the University of Toronto, researchers found that when participants were asked to suppress certain thoughts, like avoiding thinking of a white bear, they not only failed but ended up thinking about the bear more. The same applies to behavioral restraint. Telling yourself, "Don't eat the cake," doesn't reduce cravings. It actually intensifies them. And yet we keep doing it, writing it on post-its, apps, planners. Don't mess up. Don't be lazy. No excuses. Here's something interesting. Psychologists have long debated whether self-discipline is a fixed trait or a skill that can be trained. Some argue it's just a matter of building routines and muscle memory. Others insist it's more fluid, something that shifts with emotion, environment, and even sugar levels. Yes, your ability to resist temptation might tank just because you skipped lunch. And still, you probably blame yourself for not having enough discipline, like it's a fuel gauge you're supposed to keep full with shame. Spoiler alert, shame's not a great gas station. There remains considerable disagreement about how much control you really have over your own willpower at any given moment. Some researchers believe we use self-discipline like a muscle that tires out, while others think it's more about motivation alignment. But either way, trying to force it with brute willpower tends to burn out quickly. Just a quirky detail: in ancient Sparta, kids were trained not by being told what to do, but by being challenged to resist their own instincts. They weren't praised for following orders, they were praised for self-restraint in secret. It was less about obedience, more about clever control. Sounds oddly familiar to what we're getting into, doesn't it? So maybe the first step isn't about doing more, or being stronger. Maybe it's about being smarter, trickier, gentler with yourself. You see, when you set a goal and then demand immediate obedience, get up at 6 a.m. or else, you're creating a rigid structure that your mind instinctively tries to wriggle out of. But when you instead plant the idea, offer yourself freedom, or even subtly suggest the opposite, something curious happens. Your brain relaxes. You open up space for wanting, rather than forcing. This shift, away from commanding and toward inviting, is where reverse psychology tiptoes in with a mischievous grin. Instead of shouting, "Do it now," you casually think, I probably won't do it. And suddenly, some spark in you wants to prove yourself wrong. That little "I'll show you" moment? That's gold. Now, let's be clear. Reverse psychology isn't magic. It's not a wand you wave to suddenly adore doing taxes or stop craving Cheetos. But it does do something brilliant. It dances with your resistance, instead of trying to stomp it out. Think of discipline like a tango. You could try to force your partner across the dance floor, or you could lean in, let them resist just enough, then guide them where you both want to go. That's how reverse psychology works with your brain's natural contrariness. Here's a quiet truth you probably haven't told yourself enough. You're not broken because self-discipline is hard. You're just human. And humans, especially the sleep-deprived, emotionally overloaded, Netflix binging variety, aren't built for perfect control. But we are built for curiosity. And that curiosity, that little, what if I tried this backwards, impulse, is what reverse psychology can play with. So tonight, as you lie back and breathe out whatever the day dumped on you, let go of that tired old notion that more pressure equals more performance. Spoiler, it doesn't. Pressure bursts pipes, and people. What if your next breakthrough came not from pushing harder, but from pulling softly? As your breath steadies, your thoughts begin to circle a different possibility, that maybe, just maybe, self-discipline isn't about tightening your grip, but loosening it just enough to want the right thing for yourself. Let's keep floating gently down the stream of thought, and next, look at what reverse psychology actually is, how it works, why it works, and how it just might be your favorite new life hack. So, what is reverse psychology, exactly? It's probably not what you saw in cartoons, where the sly character says, "Don't go in that room," and the other person immediately runs in. That version's a little overcooked. In reality, reverse psychology is a much subtler, cleverer nudge, one that turns your brain's love of independence into motivation. You've already felt it, even if you didn't name it. You've told yourself, "Fine, I won't do the thing," and then a few hours later, you're doing the thing. It's like tricking your brain with its own reflection. Reverse psychology, at its heart, uses that sneaky part of you, the part that resists control, to steer you back toward your goals without the usual self-inflicted mental drama. The basic formula? You plant the idea of not doing something, or act like it's not allowed, or pretend not to care, and that resistance inside you perks up. Excuse me? I decide what I want. Not doing it. Watch me. That tiny inner rebel? Turns out, they're surprisingly useful. Let's ground this in something real. In a 2004 behavioral study, psychologists Sylvia and Brem explored how people reacted when told their choices were limited. The more pressure they felt to comply, the more they dug in their heels. But when they were left to feel autonomous, when it looked like they were choosing freely, they often ended up doing exactly what was suggested anyway. It's that illusion of choice that fuels the magic of reverse psychology. Now here's something you might find surprising. The effectiveness of reverse psychology isn't limited to children or the stubbornly dramatic. It works across all ages, including on you, a fully capable, responsible adult who still mysteriously resents being told to just go to bed by your Apple Watch. In fact, the more independent you are, the more likely you are to respond positively to reverse psychology, because your sense of autonomy is stronger, and more easily triggered by perceived threats to it. You want to be the captain of your own ship. Even when the seas are full of laundry, overdue taxes, and kale smoothies. An odd but true fact, in Japanese Zen teaching, there's a concept called mu, which encourages a kind of detached non-insistence. Instead of trying to force understanding or progress, students are told to release attachment to outcomes. Often, that surrender paradoxically leads to breakthroughs. It's like your brain sighs in relief when it's not constantly being managed, and then suddenly wants to cooperate. This same principle runs through reverse psychology. Instead of fighting your brain's resistance, you let it do what it wants, oppose. But you change what it's opposing. You reverse the suggestion. You're not saying, "Go exercise." You're saying, "Don't even worry about exercising today. It's not a big deal." And then a weird thing happens. Part of you wants to go. Philosophers have long debated the nature of choice, free will, and whether our decisions are really our own. Some argue that all motivation is just the product of internal chemical reactions and environmental cues. Others say we act out of a deep need to assert identity, to prove, even silently to ourselves, that we are in control. Reverse psychology taps into that second view. It gives you a mirror. And in that reflection, you often make a different choice, not because you were told, but because you decided to prove something to yourself. But let's bring it closer to home. Let's say you keep procrastinating on studying for an exam. You've tried schedules, timers, reward systems, guilt trips. Nothing sticks. But what if instead you told yourself, you know what? Maybe I won't study. Maybe I'll just wing it. Could be fun. Now here's the trick, you don't actually mean it. You're just giving your inner rebel something to push back against. And suddenly, part of you goes, no way. I don't want to fail. I have to prepare. And now, the energy comes not from pressure, but from choice. You tricked yourself into waking up your inner drive, without cracking the whip. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate, especially among behavioral economists. Is reverse psychology just a mental loophole, or does it reveal something deeper about our cognitive architecture? Some argue it's manipulation in disguise, others see it as elegant self-leverage. But either way, it works. Especially when direct motivation fails. Of course, reverse psychology isn't always successful. You can't just say the opposite of what you want and expect miracles. Context matters. Timing matters. And sincerity, even when faked, matters. If you know you're using it, does it still work? Oddly, yes. It often does. Because the part of your brain that engages with reverse suggestions, your emotional impulse center, doesn't always sync up with the part that's analyzing. You can know you're playing a mind game, and still feel compelled to play along. It's like watching a scary movie. You know it's fake, but your heart races anyway. So when you say, nah, I probably won't go to the gym, your logical self rolls its eyes. But your reactive brain perks up and goes, hang on, why not? That gap between intention and emotion is where you slide in the trick. But here's the kicker, you don't have to use reverse psychology all the time. You just need it when discipline runs dry. When routine feels like a rusty old treadmill. When your willpower meter is flashing empty. That's when you stop demanding, and start playing. And yes, it's play. Reverse psychology turns self-discipline into a game, one where you're both player and opponent, and somehow still rooting for yourself to win. It creates curiosity where there was drudgery. It whispers instead of shouting. Let's not pretend it's effortless. It takes awareness. A little performance. A willingness to wink at yourself in the mirror and say, bet you won't do the thing. But that moment, the one where your smirk turns into action, that's the sweet spot. As your thoughts begin to settle and your breath slows again, imagine what it would feel like to approach your goals with less pressure, fewer scoldings, and more gentle mischief. Because maybe the reason self-discipline feels so heavy, is that we've been carrying it the wrong way. That shift in energy leads us into something else, something deeper. Let's explore that rebellious part of you next, the inner voice that resists being told what to do, and how to make it your secret weapon. So, let's talk about your inner rebel. You know the one. That little voice that shows up right after you set a goal, fold your planner closed, and say with total confidence, starting tomorrow, I'm going to change everything. And then that voice says, are you though? It's sneaky. It doesn't yell or argue. It just sort of smirks at you from across the room, munching popcorn while you struggle through your morning routine. This rebel is a natural part of you. In psychology, it has a name, reactance. It's not a flaw. It's a protective reflex. Your brain doesn't like being told what to do, even when you are the one doing the telling. That's the weird part, right? You'd think that because it's you setting the rules, your brain would cooperate. But no. It still kicks up dust. Reactance theory, first introduced by psychologist Jack Brem in the 1960s, explains that people experience a motivational pushback when their freedoms feel threatened. This includes emotional responses like irritation, defiance, and increased interest in the forbidden action. That's why when someone says, you can't have dessert, you suddenly need dessert. Even if you weren't hungry before. You might find this surprising, even toddlers show signs of psychological reactance before they can fully speak. Give a 2-year-old a toy and say, you can play with this later, and they'll want it immediately. Remove it, and it becomes the most precious object in the universe. Sound familiar? Now apply that same principle to adult life. You say to yourself, no more sleeping in. I have to get up early. Boom, resistance. Even if early mornings make you feel amazing once you're up, that rebellious streak just doesn't like being forced. There remains considerable disagreement among scholars about whether this resistance is purely cognitive or partly emotional. Is it rational calculation, some part of your brain doing risk assessment, or is it closer to an emotional tantrum in a suit and tie? Some researchers believe reactance is a conditioned response from years of social pressure, while others think it's innate, a hardwired reflex that evolved to protect individual freedom. Here's something odd but true. In medieval France, town criers would sometimes intentionally announce fake, forbidden zones, to steer people toward places they wanted to populate. They knew that telling people to stay away would make them curious. In other words, early crowd control via reverse psychology. That same instinct pulses in you every time you make a list of goals and your chest tightens a little. Every time you announce, starting Monday, I'm cutting out sugar, and your brain quietly places a grocery order for brownies. It's not sabotage. It's protection. But here's the twist, you don't have to fight your inner rebel. You can partner with them. You start by recognizing when they show up. Usually, it's that little pang when you make a rule for yourself. That internal ugh when you schedule a workout. The sigh when your meditation app pings. You feel that resistance rising, and instead of shoving it down, you smile. You acknowledge it. Because the rebel isn't trying to destroy you. They just want to feel in charge. So let them. You can even say something like, hey, brain, don't worry. You don't have to do this thing. We're just seeing what happens. Give the rebel an out, and they'll often stop fighting. It's like trying to wrestle a cat into a bathtub. Drag them in, and they'll scratch your face off. Leave the door open, and they'll walk in 5 minutes later just to knock something off the counter. Now here's where it gets really fun. You can use your inner rebel as a source of momentum. That contrarian voice becomes a motivational engine if you point it in the right direction. Instead of making declarations like, I'm going to write 1,000 words today, you whisper, I probably won't get anything written today. That's fine. And then your rebel, who hates being underestimated, fires up and says, oh, you think I won't? Watch me. And suddenly, you're typing. Here's another playful technique, give your rebel a persona. Name them. Picture them. Maybe they wear sunglasses indoors and always roll their eyes. Maybe they mutter sarcastic comments during your self-improvement podcasts. Give them a voice, and then invite them in. Let them grumble, and then gently redirect. Oh, you think this new planner is pointless? Cool. Let's just scribble in it for 5 minutes and see how terrible it is. Suddenly you're using rebellion to get going instead of stalling out. The point is this, resistance doesn't mean failure. Resistance is energy. And energy can be redirected. Think of it like Aikido. In that martial art, you don't block force, you flow with it, guide it elsewhere. Reverse psychology is mental Aikido. Your inner rebel pushes back, and instead of shutting them down, you pivot. No worries. We're not trying to be perfect today. Just messing around. And somehow, that's enough. Now, philosophers have long debated the tension between free will and obligation, between our desire to live intentionally and our need to preserve spontaneity. Reverse psychology plays in that tension. It doesn't deny your need for goals. It just reframes the path. It says, yes, you want to do this. But let's pretend you don't, and see what happens. It's a subtle wink to yourself. That's the real secret here. Your mind doesn't always want commands. It wants play. It wants to feel clever. And when you give it a reverse prompt, a challenge wrapped in nonchalance, it lights up like a switchboard. So next time you catch yourself stiffening against a resolution, pause. Smile. And try this little thought: maybe I won't do it today. No big deal. Then wait. Watch. You might just find yourself lacing up your shoes or opening your laptop 5 minutes later, because your inner rebel had to prove you wrong. As your breath grows slower again, let that image float for a while. The idea that discipline doesn't have to be a grind. That it could, somehow, be a kind of cheeky collaboration between your dreams and your defiance. As your inner rebel stretches, yawns, and maybe even decides to play along for once, let's move into the next layer: how turning don't into do can nudge your brain into action, without the usual pressure. Now we slip quietly into a fascinating little twist in how your mind responds to commands, especially the negative ones. Picture this: you walk into the kitchen and tell yourself, "Don't eat that cookie." You're not even hungry. Maybe you just brushed your teeth. But now? That cookie is all you can think about. Why? Because the brain has a rebellious little quirk. It struggles to process negatives without first imagining the thing itself. To understand "don't eat the cookie," your brain first has to visualize eating the cookie, and by then, well, it's kind of already halfway there. This is the cognitive loophole reverse psychology loves to exploit. Instead of telling yourself directly what to do, you twist the sentence. Flip the energy. And by doing that, you lead your brain exactly where you want it to go, without setting off alarm bells of pressure and resistance. There's a mainstream psychology study that hits this perfectly. In a classic experiment from Daniel Wegner and his colleagues, participants were told not to think of a white bear. They tried. But the ones who were told to suppress the thought about white bears more often than those who weren't instructed at all. It's called the ironic process theory. The very act of resisting a thought makes it bounce back harder. Your mind doesn't like being told no, even in your own voice. Here's a quirky little example. Ever tried not to laugh at a funeral or in a completely silent classroom? The don't becomes a spotlight. Suddenly, your body wants to do the thing it's not allowed to. The idea becomes sticky. Forbidden. Delicious. So what happens when we flip that script? Instead of commanding yourself with a stern, "Don't eat junk food," you try, "Sure, you can eat it, later." Or, "You probably won't make a healthy choice today." No pressure. That little reversal often triggers the opposite impulse, because you're not forbidding anything. You're inviting yourself to choose freely. And ironically, you start wanting to make the better choice. The issue has sparked ongoing intellectual debate in cognitive psychology. Some researchers believe ironic mental processes are just cognitive errors, like your brain glitching when trying to multitask too many mental commands. Others argue these reversals are evolutionary holdovers, mechanisms designed to prevent snap obedience, just in case the command was dangerous or misleading. But either way, this error becomes incredibly useful when you use it strategically. Here's something you might find surprising: Olympic athletes sometimes train using mental reversal techniques. When trying to break a pattern of overthinking or performance anxiety, they'll joke about messing up a routine on purpose, or visualize doing the wrong move before immediately correcting it in practice. This not only relaxes the pressure but re-engages the body's natural desire to correct and succeed. That same impulse lives in your everyday tasks. Think about it. How often do you dread doing something simple because it's been labeled non-negotiable? That yoga session. That budget spreadsheet. That 10-minute journaling habit. They're great in theory. But the minute you stamp them with must, your brain flinches. Instead, try this subtle reverse nudge: "I probably won't stick to the plan today." That's okay. And then, wait. Your inner response might just be, "Actually, I kind of want to." Just to prove a point. Even if you know you're doing it, it still works. That's the best part. You can be fully aware that you're using reverse psychology on yourself, and your brain still takes the bait, because it's wired to respond to contrast. Permission breeds desire. Restriction breeds resistance. Just a quirky detail: advertisers have used this concept for decades. Limited time only, you're probably not ready for this, or even the cheeky, don't buy this jacket, ad by Patagonia. It's all crafted to provoke that spark of rebellion. Oh, really? Watch me. It's not just sales. It's psychology at play. And it works because it mirrors how your own brain tries to protect your freedom of choice. But let's be clear, this isn't about lying to yourself or reverse guilt-tripping your inner child into behaving. It's about opening a side door when the front entrance is blocked by pressure. Let's say you want to read more books. Every night, you tell yourself, read for 20 minutes before bed. But your brain says, nope, I'm tired, I want memes. Instead, try saying, reading sounds boring tonight. Let's skip it. Then, notice what happens. Sometimes, not always, your hand drifts toward that book anyway, because now it feels optional, casual. No stakes. And in that low-pressure space, you rediscover the choice to read for pleasure. This soft defiance turns the volume down on your internal pressure. And in that quiet, your actual desires get room to speak. Philosophers have long argued about whether freedom lies in choice or in choosing against choice. In other words, is self-control about willpower, or about reframing what we think we want? Reverse psychology leans into that second idea. You trick the wanting. You pretend indifference, and from that playful act, true interest reemerges. Another strategy? Make the opposite appealing. Let's say you're putting off cleaning your room. Tell yourself, actually, I love the chaos. Who wants to be organized anyway? Play up the mess. Make it sound attractive. And watch what your mind does. It'll rebel against that ridiculous claim. No, I do want clean space. And suddenly you're reaching for a trash bag. Of course, this isn't about manipulating yourself into perfection. It's about reducing friction. If every command you give yourself triggers resistance, then maybe the trick isn't stronger discipline, it's better phrasing. Softer tone. Less barking orders, more sly suggestions. Imagine your thoughts like a radio dial. Direct pressure is static. But reverse psychology? That's the low, clear signal. It gets through without alerting your defenses. As your mind floats through this idea, you can feel a little of that pressure start to ease off. The inner critic quiets down. The goal doesn't seem so heavy anymore. It's not a command now. It's a suggestion. Maybe even a dare. And speaking of dares, the next move gets even more fun. What happens when you make something forbidden? What happens when you turn your desires into the forbidden fruit, and your brain decides, it simply must have it? Let's explore that seductive pull in the next section, how denial leads to desire, and how you can make that work for you instead of against you. There's something irresistibly human about wanting what you can't have. You see it in toddlers clutching forbidden toys, in teenagers sneaking out past curfew, and, let's be honest, in yourself, when you suddenly need the one snack you swore off 10 minutes ago. It's not random. It's how your mind works. When something's off limits, it doesn't fade into the background. It glows like a neon sign. That pull, desire through denial, isn't just a fluke. It's part of a deeply rooted psychological pattern. The moment you're told something is forbidden, scarce, or unavailable, your brain lights up with interest. Not because you necessarily wanted it before, but because now, it feels rare. Controlled. Just out of reach. And that, ironically, makes it more desirable. Here's something interesting. In a 1975 study often cited in social psychology, researchers Wurchel, Lee, and Adewole ran an experiment using cookie jars. One jar had 10 cookies. Another had just 2. Participants consistently rated the cookies in the nearly empty jar as more desirable, even though the cookies were identical. Scarcity, they concluded, creates value. When something seems restricted or endangered, we want it more. Not because it's better, but because it's less available. Now apply that logic to self-discipline. You tell yourself, no more social media until after work. Suddenly, your hand's on your phone. You're not even interested in what's on there, it's just that now, it feels denied. You told yourself no, and now you want it more than ever. That's the problem. And, if used with care, the solution. Because here's the twist, if you can make the positive habit feel scarce, forbidden, or even a little naughty, you can reverse that engine. You might find this surprising. Elite performers, writers, athletes, even CEOs, sometimes withhold access to their favorite productive habits, on purpose. One author doesn't let herself write during the week, only on Sundays. The result? By the time Sunday comes, she's bursting to write. By placing artificial limits on something good, she creates longing. And longing fuels focus. It sounds backward, because it is. But that's kind of the whole theme tonight, isn't it? There remains considerable disagreement among researchers about whether self-imposed scarcity tricks the brain the same way external scarcity does. Some argue that your brain knows when you're faking it, and won't respond as strongly. Others believe the mere suggestion of limitation, even if self-created, is enough to spark curiosity and craving. Just a quirky detail, in ancient Rome, wealthy citizens would sometimes ban themselves from certain pleasures, like baths, wine, or music, for short periods of time. Not for religious reasons, but to increase their future enjoyment. They believed temporary abstinence made the return sweeter. In a way, it's historical reverse psychology, deny yourself the good thing, to want it more later. So, how do you use this in everyday life? Let's say you're trying to build a new habit, say, journaling or sketching or doing yoga. You tell yourself you should do it every day. Naturally, you rebel. Must always triggers that little pushback. But what if instead, you told yourself, actually, you're not allowed to do this today? You ban yourself from the habit. You frame it as off limits. And then, something happens. Your mind doesn't like being told no. Even when it's you doing the telling. That itch returns. But I want to do it today. That's the magic. Another version, rationing. Set strict limits on your own good behavior. Only allow yourself 3 sessions a week of the habit you're trying to build. Or even better, make yourself earn it. Not in a harsh way, but like a trade. If I clean for 10 minutes, I get to read my favorite book. Just for 15 minutes. Suddenly, the book isn't a background option, it's a prize. And that makes both behaviors more appealing. Or try the scarcity reframe. Don't say, I have to eat a salad for lunch. Say, oof. I should probably not have a salad again. I've been too healthy this week. Be playful with it. Watch what your brain does. It knows you're messing with it, but it still wants to push back. Too healthy? I'll show you. The key here is tone. You're not punishing yourself. You're teasing. Flirting with the edge of control. Making the habit feel like a stolen pleasure, not a moral obligation. And no, this doesn't mean creating dangerous restrictions or playing games with disordered patterns. We're talking about gentle reversals, psychological nudges that make the thing you want to do feel slightly rebellious, slightly denied. That's where the energy comes from. That's where curiosity and motivation start to bloom again. Philosophers have long debated whether desire is about the object or the restriction around it. Is it the thing we want, or the fact that we're not allowed to have it? Reverse psychology leans into the second answer. It doesn't just say, here's what you want. It whispers, you can't have this yet, and that whisper gets louder and more interesting with every passing moment. It's the reason people peek behind "do not enter" signs. It's the reason spoilers are irresistible. It's the reason you suddenly want to do laundry at midnight the moment someone suggests you're probably too tired. If you can learn to play with this instinct, to craft your own little moments of denial, scarcity, or forbidden reward, you open a new path to discipline. One that doesn't rely on lectures or guilt. Just cleverness. Timing. A sense of mischief. Here's another fun tip, use the invisible gate. That's when you pretend something's locked behind a mental door. You tell yourself, nope, can't start that project yet. Not until 3 p.m. And suddenly, 2:58 rolls around, and you're pacing like a racehorse. It's silly, but it works. Because you made the task feel exclusive. And in a world of constant availability, exclusivity is thrilling. So tonight, maybe try reversing your inner commands. Want to skip that task? Try telling yourself you're not allowed to do it yet. Deny it lightly. Delay it with a wink. Let your own mind chase it, just a little. And when it does, you'll feel that subtle shift, discipline as desire, not duty. As your thoughts soften into this strange, playful rhythm, we'll keep drifting forward. The next trick? Pretending you don't care about your goals at all, to start wanting them more than ever. So here's a weird little trick your mind doesn't want you to know. Sometimes, the best way to care deeply about a goal, is to pretend you don't care at all. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? You've been taught to visualize success, chant affirmations, map out step-by-step action plans. Passion. Purpose. Hustle. But what if all that intense focus actually burns you out? What if your desperate need to succeed is quietly making you want to quit? Now imagine this, you've been trying to lose weight, write a novel, or start a new business. You obsess over it. You post sticky notes everywhere. You journal about it. You make Pinterest boards and countdowns and playlists. But slowly, day by day, it all becomes heavier. Tiring. Like holding your breath underwater. Then one day, you shrug and say, whatever. Maybe I don't even care if this happens anymore. And strangely, a little spark of interest returns. That's the paradox, releasing attachment can reignite motivation. You might find this surprising. In mindfulness and acceptance-based therapy, there's a strategy known as creative hopelessness. It's used when clients feel stuck in obsessive cycles. Therapists encourage them to let go of the need to control outcomes, and through that release, people often rediscover genuine drive. It's not apathy. It's a psychological pressure release. Once the need dissolves, desire becomes more playful again. A long-standing controversy surrounds this idea in performance psychology. Some researchers argue that pretending not to care leads to actual detachment and failure. Others say the opposite, that fake indifference can spark renewed investment, because it shifts attention away from perfection and toward curiosity. You're not performing for gold stars anymore. You're experimenting. Here's something quirky but real. The Stoic philosophers practiced a technique called premeditatio malorum, literally, imagining the worst. They would picture failure, rejection, ruin, on purpose. Why? Because by mentally releasing their attachment to success, they stopped fearing it. And without fear, action became easier. Sometimes, pretending you don't care helps you care better. Now let's bring this back to your goals. You say you want to build a morning routine, but every time the alarm rings, your brain screams, nope. You've built it up too much. This is the thing that will fix my life. That pressure? It's exhausting. It turns simple actions into emotional landmines. So what if, instead, you say, math? Maybe I'll just sleep in. Who even cares about a routine? That shift, gentle, sarcastic, dismissive, is a psychological bait and switch. You let go of the demand, and in the quiet that follows, your brain sometimes chooses the goal anyway. Why? Because now it wants to. Not out of pressure, but out of freedom. That's the key. Reverse psychology replaces need with choice. And when you feel like you're choosing your goals instead of being dragged toward them, everything changes. Let's try another example. You've been telling yourself for weeks, I have to eat healthy. No more junk. That's a noble goal. But the urgency, the desperation, the shame, those turn the salad into punishment. Now imagine saying, ugh, screw it. I'll just eat garbage forever. Suddenly, a different voice pipes up. Well, maybe I'll make something decent today. Just because. It's not about surrendering. It's about detaching. Think of your goal as a balloon. The tighter you grip it, the more it threatens to pop. But if you loosen your hand, it floats there, inviting you to follow it. No tugging required. Philosophers have long debated the nature of desire and detachment. Eastern traditions often preach the value of non-attachment, that by letting go of craving, we actually gain clarity. Western thinkers, by contrast, emphasize striving, vision, and commitment. Reverse psychology, oddly, dances between the two. It borrows detachment to revive desire. It lets you take a break from caring, just long enough to want again. Here's another angle: goals, when over-pursued, can become part of your identity. I am a runner. I am an artist. And when you fall short even briefly, that identity cracks. So instead, try being casual. Shrug it off. Maybe I'm not a real artist. Maybe I just doodle for fun. And in that throwaway statement, you might feel the desire to really draw return. Not for identity. Just for you. Just a quirky detail. The Japanese concept of shibumi refers to understated elegance or effortlessness, something powerful that arises from not trying too hard. It's the beauty of quiet mastery. Sometimes your goals need less fire, and more stillness. So how do you use this in practice? Here are a few gentle, goal reversal, phrases to try. I probably won't stick to the plan this week. No big deal. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this habit. It's fine if this doesn't work. I can always fail gracefully. Honestly, maybe I just don't care anymore. Now pause. Listen. You'll often feel a spark, some defiant part of you rising up to say, no. I do care. I want this. And there it is. Desire, revived. Remember, the rebel in you needs to feel like they're in charge. Not pushed. Not dragged. So let them act like they don't care, just long enough to choose caring on their own. Reverse psychology doesn't mean faking disinterest forever. It means giving your mind space. Taking the pressure off. Letting go of the outcome so you can enjoy the process again. You don't need to white-knuckle your way to success. You can smirk your way there, shrug your way there, stumble there in your pajamas if you want to. The only thing that matters is that you keep showing up. And sometimes, pretending you won't, helps you show up more often. So tonight, maybe take a deep breath. Exhale that heavy need to achieve. Say to yourself, I'm over it. Let the weight fall off your shoulders. And just see what rises. Now, let's explore the next peculiar twist. What happens when you give yourself full permission to fail, and discover that you fail less? Let's talk about one of the strangest, most counterintuitive ideas you'll ever hear when it comes to building self-discipline. Giving yourself permission to fail might actually make you succeed more. Yep. You heard that right. It sounds reckless, doesn't it? Like telling a firefighter, feel free to let the building burn. Or whispering to a surgeon, no worries if this one's a flop. But your mind doesn't work like a high-stakes operating table. It works more like a toddler on a tricycle, skittish, sensitive, and surprisingly creative when left alone. So here's the twist: when you let go of the demand to be perfect, when you stop gripping your goals like a steering wheel on black ice, your brain loosens up. It relaxes. And in that softer state, you often perform better. You take more risks. You start. Why? Because you remove the fear of failure. And that fear? It's often what's really stopping you. Here's something interesting from psychology. In a 2009 study, researchers at the University of Southern California found that students who were encouraged to imagine failing and then forgiving themselves for it, before even starting their tasks, showed more motivation and performed better on academic goals. It wasn't optimism that boosted performance, it was permission to be imperfect. The mind is a curious beast. The more tightly you chain it to success or else, the more it balks. That inner rebel again. That defiant whisper, what if I just don't? So instead, reverse the trap. Instead of saying, you must do this or you're worthless, you say, hey, you can skip it. You can fail. It's fine. And somehow, magically, your brain goes, wait. No. I kind of want to do it now. An odd but true fact, in certain addiction recovery programs, counselors will actually encourage relapses to be discussed openly and without shame. Why? Because when failure is no longer terrifying, people are more honest, and more likely to keep trying. The taboo loses its grip. And suddenly, behavior changes. There remains considerable disagreement in clinical circles about how far this permission to fail should go. Some experts warn that it risks creating apathy. Others argue that removing the shame barrier is essential for long-term change. The balance lies, it seems, in tone. You're not saying failure is fine forever. You're saying failure is survivable. It's part of the plan. Here's the real mind twist. When you convince yourself that you can give up at any time, that nothing terrible will happen if you stop, you often don't stop. Because the thread is gone. There's no one to defy anymore. Not even yourself. Imagine saying this before your next attempt at a hard task. You can walk away halfway through. No shame. No guilt. Just try it and see how different that feels from. You have to do this. Finish it no matter what. In the first case, you're free. Free to try. Free to fail. And that freedom unlocks energy. The pressure that once stalled you out? Gone. Philosophers have long debated the role of fear in motivation. Some say we need it, a fire at our backs. Others argue that fear creates paralysis, and that true progress comes from self-compassion. Reverse psychology takes the latter's side, with a grin. It says, sure, screw it up if you want to. You're allowed. And suddenly, you don't want to anymore. Here's a trick to try, the I can quit anytime mantra. It sounds lazy. It sounds like procrastination's evil twin. But weirdly, it gives you power. Every time you approach a habit that feels hard, exercising, writing, meditating, whisper to yourself, I don't have to do this. I can bail after 5 minutes. Most of the time, you stay longer. Because your inner child isn't being dragged to piano lessons anymore. They're being invited to play a few notes, then leave if they're bored. And guess what? Sometimes they keep playing for an hour. Another version, try setting absurdly low expectations. Not write for an hour, but write one terrible sentence. Not clean the whole kitchen, but throw away one old banana. Not work out, but put on gym clothes and sit on the floor. Then, tell yourself you can stop. You probably will stop. That's fine. And see what happens. 9 times out of 10, momentum kicks in. Because starting is the hard part. And starting becomes easier when you're not afraid of failing to finish. Just a quirky detail, some comic artists famously force themselves to draw one ugly panel before starting a page. Why? Because it lowers the stakes. No more perfectionism. Just movement. And movement is the real magic here. Think about how many times you've not started something because you were afraid you wouldn't finish. That's where this reverse psychology twist helps. You pull out the sting. You tell yourself, it's okay if I don't go all the way. And then, ironically, you often do. Now, of course, this doesn't work if it becomes your escape hatch. If you start quitting everything under the banner of no pressure, then, yeah, we've lost the thread. But used sparingly, strategically, this trick becomes a safety net. One that gives you permission to fly without the fear of splatting. Philosophers like Kierkegaard and Camus once described freedom as terrifying, a dizzying drop into the unknown. But reverse psychology takes that drop and turns it into a game. You don't have to jump. But you could. Just once. So tonight, as you drift further into calm, maybe let yourself fail, in your imagination. Picture skipping that routine. Messing up the journal entry. Burning the omelet. Laugh at it. Shrug. And then, notice if your mind gently reaches for success again, just because it wants to. That quiet little reach? That's the spark we're after. Next up, we lean into something even sneakier: how to make the boring stuff suddenly feel interesting again. Yes, even folding laundry or answering emails. Boredom. It's the ultimate discipline killer. You're more likely to skip a task because it's dull than because it's hard. Let's face it, you can handle hard. You've survived group projects, customer service calls, and assembling IKEA furniture with half the screws missing. But boring? That's the silent assassin. The flatline. The yawn that kills the routine. So how do you outsmart that? How do you make the snooze-fest parts of life, laundry, dishes, bookkeeping, email, feel less like punishment? Enter reverse psychology again, quietly tiptoeing into your routine with a smirk. The trick is to reframe boring tasks as off-limits, forbidden, or somehow too advanced for now. Make them seem exclusive. Make them seem like they might actually be interesting if you weren't too busy doing more important things. It's the classic, you can't have it, ploy, repackaged for spreadsheets and socks. Let's start with something practical. You've been putting off cleaning out your inbox. You know it needs to be done, but it just feels like digital purgatory. Now try telling yourself, you know what? I'm not going to check emails today. It's too tedious. I'll leave that mountain alone. Cue the reverse effect. Your brain, now faced with a sudden absence of the option, begins to poke you, but what if there's something urgent? Something juicy? Something satisfying to sort? Suddenly, a small part of you wants to open Gmail, if only to prove that you can. It's not manipulation. It's self-persuasion. It's letting your brain trip over its own defiance, land face first in the task, and then realize, hey, this isn't so bad. Here's something interesting. A 2013 study published in the journal Emotion found that people were more engaged and focused when performing tasks framed as voluntary versus assigned. Even if the tasks were identical, just thinking it was your idea made the experience less boring. Reverse psychology sneaks this voluntary feeling back in, even when you're dealing with, say, folding a mountain of socks. You might find this surprising. During World War II, the US military used reverse psychology-style propaganda, not on enemies, but on their own troops. Posters would say things like, "Don't bother conserving fuel. Waste it, someone else will save the war." This sarcastic tone got soldiers to engage more than standard orders. Because no one likes being underestimated, especially not by their own team. So next time you're dreading a chore, say something sarcastic to yourself. Like, "Oh no, not more thrilling spreadsheet work. What a privilege." That little eye roll? That fake contempt? It invites humor. And humor cracks open the shell of boredom. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate among educators and workplace psychologists. Some argue boredom is a fixed emotional state, unchangeable unless the task itself becomes more stimulating. Others believe it's almost entirely perceptual. In other words, if you think something is dull, it will be. But if you trick your brain into seeing it as mildly absurd, slightly naughty, or bizarrely exclusive, it can feel interesting again. Just a quirky detail: the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once described boredom as the root of all evil, a force that drives people to gamble, cheat, and abandon routines. But he also believed boredom was a choice. That if you approached something with enough imagination, it would unfold in new ways. Kind of sounds like reverse psychology in a 19th century Danish cape. Let's try a few techniques you can whisper to yourself during your next dull task. The forbidden task trick. Nope. I'm not allowed to do dishes today. It's too satisfying. The sarcastic reverse. Oh, great. Another thrilling data entry session. Can't wait. The mystery frame. There might be something weird or valuable hidden in this chore. But whatever. The challenge reversal. Let's see how lazy I can be while still getting this halfway done. Each one plays with the boredom. It doesn't fight it directly. It invites your resistance to participate. Think about it. your mind resists boring tasks because they feel meaningless. But if you add a little rebellion, even fake rebellion, you suddenly give your brain a reason to engage. Here's another strategy: give the task a fake label. Don't say, "I'm folding laundry." Say, "I'm conducting a silent textile meditation ceremony." Don't say, "I'm entering receipts." Say, "I'm decoding the secret language of commerce." Don't say, "I'm meal prepping." Say, "I'm creating edible art that future me will worship." You're not lying. You're rebranding. It's the same reason novelty packaging works on snacks. If the same pretzels are in a bright new bag, they somehow taste fresher. Same with your tasks. Philosophers have long debated what gives actions meaning. Is it the task itself, or the intention behind it? Reverse psychology suggests meaning can be teased out through tone, perspective, and playfulness. If you treat something as precious, forbidden, or mockingly important, your brain follows. Another trick? Pretend you're not allowed to finish the task. I can organize half the closet, but no more. It's too powerful. I might get addicted to productivity. This one's fun because your brain hates artificial limitation. You'll often find yourself doing more than you planned, just to defy the imaginary rule you made up 15 seconds ago. Just like a toddler who's told not to color on the walls, and suddenly has the strongest artistic inspiration. And the best part? This works even when you know it's a trick. Because the part of your brain that resists boredom isn't the rational part. It's emotional. And emotion responds to suggestion, tone, even a smidge of sarcasm. So tonight, as your body sinks deeper into rest and your mind wanders back to tomorrow's to-do list, try this: don't dread the boring tasks. Tease them. Reverse them. Turn them into silly games you're not supposed to enjoy. Because maybe folding clothes is boring, until it becomes a secret challenge. Maybe meal prep is dull, until it's a rogue act of domestic rebellion. Maybe email is soul-draining, until it's your sneaky way to feel like a stealthy, overqualified inbox ninja. And when that shift happens, you're back in motion. You're doing the thing. The boredom is still there, but it's background noise now. Because you've flipped the frame. Now, let's pivot into something even lazier. That version of you who doesn't want to try anything? Yeah, we're about to trick them too. Because even the most unmotivated version of you can fall for the right reverse psychology trap. Now let's get truly lazy. Not snooze button once lazy. We're talking full on, sink into the couch, remote falls on the floor and you just leave it there lazy. The version of you who knows what needs to be done, and would rather wrestle a raccoon than open your calendar. We all have that version inside. Sometimes it takes over for an hour. Sometimes a month. But here's the question: can you reverse psychology that version of yourself into getting things done? Absolutely. In fact, the lazier you feel, the better this technique works. Because when your motivation is completely flatlined, traditional approaches don't cut it. No amount of motivational quotes or perfectly curated Notion templates will reach the version of you that just whispered, "I'll do it tomorrow, probably." So here's the trick: don't fight the laziness. Work with it. You start by telling yourself you're not going to do the task. Not today. Not this hour. It's too much. We're too tired. Too over it. We deserve to rot peacefully on this couch. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a little voice says, "Hold on. Are we really skipping it?" That's the rebel again. Still kicking. Here's something interesting. In 2011, researchers at the University of Zurich explored the concept of implementation intentions, where you commit to taking action if and only if a very specific condition is met. Like, if I feel like it, I'll wash the dishes. The surprising result? Just setting that vague, low-pressure trigger increased the likelihood of follow-through. It turns out, giving lazy you full permission to not act actually makes acting more likely. Why? Because you're not cornering yourself. You're leaving the door open. And lazy you doesn't like being underestimated. Here's a phrase to try. "I'm way too lazy to do this now." Maybe tomorrow. Unless I randomly feel like it. Suddenly, you're curious. What if I do feel like it? And just like that, you're leaning forward. You might find this surprising. Some of the most productive creatives in history, like Franz Kafka or Agatha Christie, built routines around inertia. Kafka used to write while lying down. Christie wrote while eating apples in the bathtub. They weren't trying to be efficient. They were trying to outwit their own inertia with strange comfort-based rituals. Sound lazy? Maybe. But they wrote masterpieces. Just a quirky detail. There's an old Japanese folk tale about a man so lazy, he trained his dog to fetch firewood, cook rice, and answer the door. The moral wasn't about avoiding laziness, it was about channeling it into cleverness. Which, honestly, might be a mood. So let's channel your laziness, not fight it. Here's one way: set the lowest possible bar. Not write a page, but open the dock. Not clean the kitchen, but throw away one thing. Not go for a walk, but put on shoes. Lazy you hates movement, but can't resist absurdly easy wins. And then, this is key, give yourself permission to stop after that first step. Say it clearly: I'll open the dock, but I won't write. That's too much. And then your fingers start twitching. Maybe one line, 5 minutes later, you're flowing. It's reverse psychology for the unmotivated soul. You build just enough momentum that the lazy part of you forgets it's supposed to be protesting. Now, philosophers have long debated the role of sloth in the human condition. Some call it a vice, one of the deadly sins. Others argue it's a survival mechanism, a way of conserving energy. But reverse psychology offers a third path: laziness isn't the enemy. It's a puzzle to be solved. With humor, patience, and a few mental tricks. Try these out on yourself next time you're deep in Slump City. Let's not do anything today. We'll resume being functional next year. I'm clearly too lazy to even pretend to care. Guess that means I'm free. I could fold this laundry, but I'd hate to ruin my streak of doing absolutely nothing. Let's lie down near the laundry basket and see what happens. These phrases work because they diffuse the shame. They stop you from battling yourself. And in that soft moment of surrender, effort sometimes slips in through the side door. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate in behavioral economics. Do people act because of internal motivation, or do they act to avoid internal discomfort? Reverse psychology suggests both are true. But when motivation runs dry, reducing discomfort, by dropping the pressure, is often what gets you moving again. Another trick? Pretend someone challenged you to not do the task. Oh, you think I can't procrastinate all day? Watch me. And boom, part of you suddenly wants to be productive, just to ruin the joke. You're still lazy, but now you're lazily proving someone wrong. That counts as effort. One more idea: reward yourself for doing absolutely nothing. Tell yourself, if I sit here and don't even blink for 10 minutes, I get a cookie. You'll last 4 minutes, tops, before boredom tricks you into standing up and doing the thing you were avoiding. Reverse psychology wins again. Now, let's not pretend this always works. There will be days when lazy you wins. Completely. Gloriously. But that's okay. Because even laziness gets boring eventually. And when it does, that's when your playful, rebellious energy comes back. So tonight, instead of pressuring yourself to get it together, try the opposite. Tell yourself, tomorrow, I plan to be even less productive. Watch what happens. And when the spark returns, when your body leans forward or your fingers hover over a keyboard, follow it. Not because you must. But because, oddly, you kind of want to. That shift in energy brings us into our next strange reversal: what to do when you're on the verge of giving up entirely, and how reverse psychology can flip your mindset at the exact moment you think all is lost. You've probably been here before. That moment when the goal, the habit, the whole plan, feels completely pointless. You're exhausted, disillusioned, and right on the edge of muttering, forget it. Or maybe something stronger: but we'll keep it PG tonight. It's that tipping point where all your effort feels wasted. You've missed one too many workouts. Eaten the cake. Spent the money. Ignored the planner. Again. So why even keep going? That's when most people give up. Not because the goal was too hard, but because the shame got too loud. And once shame moves in, motivation slips quietly out the back door. But here's where reverse psychology, with all its sneaky little magic, whispers, what if giving up is the way forward? I know. That sounds like a motivational poster in a clown mirror. But stay with me. When you're right on the edge of quitting, whether it's a diet, a journal habit, a creative project, what if you said to yourself, fine. Quit. Give up. Let's go all the way. Let's really mess this up. It feels dangerous. Irresponsible. Like psychological skydiving without a parachute. But oddly, it calms the noise. Because the pressure to keep it together suddenly lifts. The storm in your brain breaks for a second, and something unexpected happens. You don't quit. Or at least, not all the way. Here's something interesting. In a study on self-affirmation by Claude Steele and colleagues, participants who were allowed to explore their failures and permitted to view them as non-defining were more likely to return to their goals. The study found that giving people a sense of identity outside the goal helped protect their motivation. When failure didn't feel like the end, people kept going. Reverse psychology taps into that same moment. You don't force yourself forward. You allow yourself to fall, and in that fall, you often find your footing again. An odd but true fact, mountaineers who summit Everest often reach a psychological low at base camp, not at the summit. Why? Because that's when doubt hits the hardest. After all the effort, the goal still feels far. Some guides actually encourage climbers to mentally quit at base camp, to imagine giving up fully, to play it out, and this mental reset often reignites their drive to climb. So when you hit your version of base camp, those late night spirals, the what's the point mornings, you can try it too. Sit down. Say out loud, you know what? Let's quit. Let's tank this habit in glorious flames. Let's really lean into failure. And then pause. Feel what comes next. It might be deflation, or laughter. Or a weird little resistance that kicks up from inside, saying, but I don't want to quit. Not all the way. That's the part we're after. Because here's the truth, wanting to give up is often just wanting relief. From pressure, from shame, from the crushing weight of being disciplined. Reverse psychology offers that relief, but then leaves the door open for re-entry. There remains considerable disagreement among motivational theorists about this approach. Some argue it borders on self-sabotage. Others point to it as emotional aikido, using the momentum of despair to pivot into renewed choice. What both sides agree on: motivation is never static. It ebbs and flows. And when it ebbs, reverse psychology offers a gentle tide pool to rest in. You might find this surprising. Tibetan monks training in long-term meditation sometimes simulate giving up. They'll spend an entire session telling themselves, this is pointless. This is not working. I should stop. The result? A deeper awareness. And often, an unexpected return to stillness. Sometimes, going through the giving up tunnel brings you out the other side. Just a quirky detail, in Finland, there's an actual resignation festival. Yes, you read that correctly. Once a year, people gather to openly quit things, relationships, jobs, habits, symbolically. The idea? Release the pressure of perfection. Embrace impermanence. Ironically, many people report feeling more motivated after the festival ends. So how do you use this in your own low moment? Here's a step-by-step mini-reversal ritual for when you want to quit. Name it bluntly. I want to quit this goal. It's stupid and hard. Give yourself fake permission. Cool. Let's quit. Let's do absolutely nothing productive today. Add some playful exaggeration. Let's burn the journal. Eat cake in the bathtub. Start a new life as a professional napper. Wait. Let the mental rebellion pass. Let the quiet arrive. Then whisper this, unless we're not done yet. And there it is. The moment where quitting turns into breathing room, and breathing room turns into movement. Because the truth is, you don't always need a motivational speech. You sometimes just need a break. And if the only way to take one is to pretend to quit entirely, so be it. That trick works. And when you feel even slightly ready to begin again, the path is still there. Quietly waiting. Philosophers have long debated the value of surrender. Some view it as weakness. Others see it as wisdom. Reverse psychology frames it as strategy. It says, pretend to surrender. Try it on. Then choose again. And that's the secret, you get to choose again. Tonight, if you're hovering near the edge of giving up, go ahead. Quit in your mind. Walk through that imaginary door. Feel how light it gets when you're not dragging all the pressure behind you. And when you're ready, maybe step back toward your goal. No fanfare. No declarations. Just quiet defiance of the part that gave up. Let's carry that softness into the next phase. How doing things the wrong way on purpose can actually help you build stronger, stickier habits than ever before. Now for one of the most delightfully upside-down tricks in this whole reverse psychology toolkit, doing things the wrong way on purpose. Sounds absurd, right? You've been told your whole life that habits are about precision, consistency, and doing it the right way. Correct form. Best practices. Don't mess it up. But what if messing it up is exactly what makes it stick? Let's say you've been trying to build a journaling habit. You tell yourself, every morning, 3 pages, no distractions. Sounds noble. But you miss one day. Then 2. Now the notebook glares at you like an X. Suddenly the habit feels too rigid, too high maintenance. So what do? You break it. You write upside down. You journal in incomplete sentences. You use crayon. You write total nonsense. On purpose. And just like that, it's fun again. That's the reverse psychology move. Take the pressure to do it right, and flip it on its head. Wrong becomes your entry point. And your brain, relieved of expectations, comes back to the habit with curiosity. Here's something interesting. In a 2016 study from the University of Pennsylvania, researchers found that people who reframed their habits as play or experimentation were significantly more likely to sustain them. Those who approached tasks with rigidity, set times, rules, all-or-nothing goals, were more likely to burn out. But those who gave themselves permission to do it wrong often ended up doing it more. This taps into something deeper than motivation. It connects to how we interpret success. If every habit has to be done perfectly to count, most of us stop trying. But if even a goofy, lopsided, half-hearted version still counts, we keep showing up. Just a quirky detail, Pablo Picasso once painted using the ashes of his own burned letters. Was it archival quality? Absolutely not. Was it the right way? Nope. But it was consistent. Bold. Personal. And it kept him creating. You might find this surprising. The wrong way approach isn't just tolerated in creativity, it's often celebrated. Writers are told to write terrible first drafts. Musicians are told to improvise badly. Chefs are encouraged to make ugly food that still tastes amazing. And somehow, through those imperfect repetitions, greatness emerges. So how do you apply this to self-discipline? Let's say you want to meditate, but you hate sitting still. Great. Meditate wrong. Lie down. Fidget. Put on a hoodie and curl up like a cinnamon roll. Just breathe. Want to start exercising but hate workouts? Awesome. Dance around your room for 90 seconds in pajamas. Yell, "This counts," at the ceiling. It does count. Because you're moving. That's all that matters. Here's the formula. Wrong plus done right plus skipped. That's what builds the habit muscle. There remains considerable disagreement among productivity experts about whether consistency or quality matters more. Some argue that sloppy repetition just wires in bad habits. Others point out that if you don't start at all, quality never happens. Reverse psychology supports the latter: get moving first, clean it up later. Here's another trick: the anti-perfection challenge. Take any habit you're trying to build and ask, what's the most ridiculous, imperfect version of this I could still technically do? Want to read more? Read one paragraph of a trashy novel while chewing loudly. Want to eat healthier? Eat a single baby carrot while dramatically declaring it's changing your life. Want to write daily? Type 3 swear words into a Google Doc and walk away. Guess what? That's a win. Because you're training your brain that effort matters more than elegance. Philosophers have long debated the role of imperfection in human progress. Some traditions, like Japanese wabi-sabi, embrace flaws as beauty. Others, like classical Greek aesthetics, emphasize symmetry and ideal form. Reverse psychology sides with wabi-sabi. It says, mess it up. Get your fingerprints all over it. Let it be weird. This also reduces friction. Most people fail to build habits not because the task is hard, but because the expectation of doing it perfectly is paralyzing. So if you go into the habit expecting to flub it, sabotage it, make it ridiculous, and still do it, you win. Because you've removed the barrier. Let's try some phrases you can use on yourself. I'm going to journal today, but make it barely legible. Time to work out, by doing 3 chaotic jumping jacks and lying down. Let's meditate, and think about pizza the entire time. I'll clean the kitchen, by throwing 1 spoon in the drawer and calling it a day. It sounds dumb. That's the point. Because your resistance isn't logical, it's emotional. And when you meet it with play, with humor, with intentional imperfection, it softens. Just like a kid learning to skate, you'll fall more if you try too hard not to fall. But if you go into it ready to wobble, you relax. And when you relax, you balance. Another useful tool: keep a log of your worst habit attempts. Make it a journal or a note on your phone. Every bad workout, every half-hearted journal entry, every "oops I did 5 minutes instead of 30" moment. Collect them. Celebrate them. Because those moments mean you showed up. You didn't ghost the goal. You flirted with it. You danced near it. And over time, those tiny crooked steps become a path. Eventually, you'll do the habit the right way more often. But only because the wrong way kept you in the game long enough to grow. So tonight, as you rest deeper into that soft headspace, think about one habit that's been nagging at you. The one you haven't done because you don't have time, or don't know how, or aren't ready. Now imagine doing it wrong. Loudly. Sloppily. Dramatically. And smiling as you do. Because showing up, imperfect, defiant, slightly ridiculous, is still showing up. And that brings us into a new kind of planning. One that doesn't demand obedience from your future self, but instead tricks them into cooperation. Let's wander into that next. Let's now take this mischievous mindset and bring it into your planning. That's right, we're going to use reverse psychology not just to survive the moment, but to outsmart your future self. Yes, the one who always promises, tomorrow I'll be productive, and then somehow ends up reorganizing the fridge, watching rabbit videos, and forgetting everything except the most trivial tasks. Here's the truth you already know: your future self is unreliable. They're not smarter or more focused than you. They're just you, in a slightly different mood, probably wearing the same pajamas. So how do you make that future version of you cooperate, without the usual pep talks, to-do lists, and well-intentioned nagging? You trick them. Not with force. Not with guilt. But with clever, gentle traps. This is reverse psychology applied to planning, and it works surprisingly well. Start here, Instead of writing a to-do list that says, workout, finish budget, reply to emails, meditate, you write a new kind of list. Something like, tasks I will absolutely ignore today. Overrated chores that I might accidentally do. Stuff I refuse to do before 3 p.m. See what happens? You've taken the pressure off. You're not commanding. You're baiting. And that bait flips the emotional resistance. Now your future self wants to poke around the forbidden list, just to see if they're really going to skip it. You might find this surprising. In a behavioral study published in Psychological Science, researchers found that people who used temptation bundling, linking boring tasks with forbidden pleasures, like only watching a guilty pleasure show while exercising, were more likely to follow through on the task. The forbidden fun made the obligation more tolerable. That's reverse psychology in disguise. You're turning compliance into a treat. So what else can you do to lure your future self? 1. Leave sarcastic notes. Instead of a sticky note that says, finish your taxes, try. There's no way you'll touch these forms. Too much math. Probably best to procrastinate until the IRS sends you a love letter. Your brain reads it, rolls its eyes, and immediately wants to prove it wrong. That's the rebel waking up. 2. Set fake deadlines. Tell yourself, don't do this before Friday. Or, definitely not touching this until next week. Watch what happens. Future you suddenly has a burning need to do it early. Why? Because the restriction was artificial, and your inner contrarian knows it. 3. Assign reverse priorities. Label the least important task as urgent. The most important one as whatever. It sounds ridiculous, but future you may start with the whatever just to defy the label. Just a quirky detail, Leonardo da Vinci kept journals where he'd list wildly impossible tasks alongside mundane ones. Things like draw the wings of a dragonfly and get new shoelaces. Historians believe this was partially to depressure the list, so he didn't feel trapped by any single item. Playfulness in planning is older than productivity apps. Here's another approach: leave things half done. Start a task, then deliberately stop midway. Scribble a line in your journal. Half wash a dish. Open the spreadsheet and color one cell blue. Then walk away. Why? Because unfinished tasks itch. There's a psychological phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect, which says incomplete tasks stick in your memory more than finished ones. Future you will feel that itch. And odds are, they'll finish what you started. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate in time management circles. Should we prioritize meticulous planning, or embrace improvisation? Reverse psychology says, plan in ways that trick your resistance. That means your system doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be persuasive. Here's a fun one: hide your to-do list. Seriously. Write it, then tuck it under something. Say, you're not allowed to look at it until 2 p.m. Suddenly, your brain is curious. What did we even write? Is it something cool? Curiosity is stronger than pressure. Philosophers have long debated how much of our future behavior is shaped by free will versus manipulation, whether we really choose or just respond to cues. Reverse psychology in planning embraces this mystery. It doesn't care whether future you is truly choosing, as long as the goal gets done. Another trick? Future sabotage that turns into success. Try this: leave yourself a message like, "Dear tomorrow me, bet you're going to flake on your goals again." Classic. You'll read it and immediately feel challenged. No one wants to be the predictable flake, even when you're the one writing the insult. Now, to be clear, this isn't about being cruel to yourself. It's cheeky. Light. The tone should be more eye roll than shame spiral. Think sitcom character, not angry boss. Let's try a few sample lines you can use. You're totally not doing that run. Don't even think about lacing up. Meditation? LOL. That's adorable. Please enjoy your third snack instead. Not a chance we'll work on the novel. Maybe binge a crime documentary instead? Half the time, you'll catch yourself doing the thing, just to spite the snark. Just like how telling a kid, "You can't do this yet," makes them laser-focused on proving they can. So tonight, as your thoughts drift toward tomorrow's calendar or the looming stack of things you should do, pause. What if you made those tasks into tricks? What if the to-do list wasn't a guilt trip, but a setup for clever defiance? What if your whole routine became a soft little dare? You don't need perfect plans. You need sneaky ones. The kind that bypass your future resistance and sneak into motion before excuses even have time to form. And speaking of tricks, what happens when you overdo it? Can reverse psychology lose its power if used too often? Let's go there next. So here we are, deep into the delicious mischief of using reverse psychology to outwit yourself. But now it's time to ask the inevitable question: what happens when you overdo it? Because yes, reverse psychology is clever. It's cheeky. It helps you slip past mental resistance, reframe your habits, and breathe new life into boring routines. But like any trick, it loses its sparkle if you rely on it too much. Use it all day, every day, and it stops feeling like freedom, and starts feeling like manipulation. Even if it's self-manipulation. Reverse psychology works because it creates contrast. It surprises your brain, catches it off guard, sparks curiosity, and invites rebellion in the direction you actually want to go. But the minute your mind expects the reversal, the game's up. You say, "I probably won't clean the kitchen today," and instead of lurching into motion, your brain sighs, yeah, I know the drill." No spark. No rebellion. Just eye-rolling boredom. This is where subtlety matters. Think of reverse psychology not as a daily crutch, but as a secret spice. A seasoning you sprinkle in your mental stew, not the main ingredient. There's a mainstream psychology concept that ties in perfectly here: hedonic adaptation. It's the tendency of the brain to get used to anything, good or bad, over time. That new productivity trick that fired you up last week? Dull now. That cute planner you swore by? Gathering dust. Your mind normalizes whatever becomes routine. So yes, even your clever little mental Jedi mind tricks can go stale if you run them too often. An odd but true fact: professional magicians often rotate out their best tricks, not because the audience catches on, but because they get bored performing them. That boredom leaks through, and the illusion fades. In the same way, overusing reverse psychology makes it feel like a chore, instead of a clever nudge. There remains considerable disagreement in behavior science about how long motivational hacks stay effective. Some researchers suggest novelty is required for ongoing success, others believe habit, not novelty, is what really sustains progress. Reverse psychology floats somewhere between both. It feels novel, even when the habit is old. But only if you use it with finesse. Here's something you might find surprising: in military training, instructors are warned not to use sarcasm too often when motivating soldiers. A sarcastic order can boost morale, once or twice. But if it becomes constant, it erodes authority. Same with reverse psychology. If you reverse everything, your brain starts tuning it out. So what can you do? You rotate tactics. Instead of always saying, "Don't do it," switch it up. Use silence. Use randomness. Use fake stakes, like imaginary deadlines or playful consequences. Keep your inner self guessing. Keep the mental game a little weird. And most importantly, stay honest with yourself. Reverse psychology isn't about lying. It's about loosening the mental grip long enough to invite movement. If it starts feeling like a scam, even to you, that's your sign to pause. Here's a self-check you can do. Ask, am I using this technique to create freedom, or to dodge honesty? Because sometimes, what looks like clever self-talk is just avoidance in costume. If you're using reverse psychology to avoid facing something real, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of being ordinary, no trick will fix that. You'll just end up in a loop of dodging instead of doing. Philosophers have long debated the difference between play and deceit. Is tricking yourself noble? Or naive? Reverse psychology walks that line. It only works when it's playful. When it helps you reframe without self-delusion. So let's talk damage control. If you've been leaning too hard on these tactics and they've stopped working, here's what to do. 1. Take a full break from mental tricks. Go back to basics. One task. One goal. No reverse logic. No cleverness. Just pure, boring effort. Reset the system. 2. Acknowledge the overuse. Say to yourself, okay, I've been trying to outsmart myself too much. Let's stop playing for a bit. This kind of honesty disarms resistance in a different way. 3. Get curious again. Instead of saying, I won't do this, or let's fail on purpose, say, I wonder what would happen if I just tried without expectations. Neutrality is sometimes more powerful than trickery. Just a quirky detail: some actors, when prepping for emotionally complex scenes, will do their lines completely wrong in rehearsal, laughing, screaming, singing them, just to shake off stiffness. Then, when it's time to perform for real, the emotion lands naturally. That's how you can treat reverse psychology. Use it to shake loose the pressure, but know when to drop it. It's okay to grow out of tricks. They serve their purpose. They get you moving. But as you evolve, so does your strategy. Think of it like this: reverse psychology is your starter motor. It fires the engine. But once you're cruising, you don't keep turning the key. So tonight, maybe take a moment to reflect. Are your inner mind games still feeling fun? Or are they becoming stale? If they still spark a grin, great. Keep sprinkling them in. If they've dulled, step back. Let stillness do the work for a while. Because discipline isn't about always being clever. Sometimes, it's about being still long enough to want to move again. And speaking of stillness, our final chapter drifts into a different kind of mastery. Not the loud, intense kind. But the quiet, playful, peaceful kind. The kind you build when you stop fighting yourself and start collaborating. Let's head there next. So here we are. After all the inner plot twists, cheeky tricks, and softly rebellious reframes, we land in the final stretch of this strange little journey. A journey through your own brain, your resistance, your goals, and all the clever ways you've been nudging yourself back into motion. Now we talk about mastery. But not the shiny, Instagram quote kind. Not grind now, shine later, or rise and hustle. No. We're talking about playful mastery. Quiet mastery. The kind where you stop fighting your own instincts and start teaming up with them. Because what reverse psychology really teaches you isn't how to trick yourself, it's how to befriend yourself. You've seen by now that motivation is moody. Habits are slippery. Discipline doesn't always respond to direct commands. But curiosity, sarcasm, permission, those tend to sneak in where pressure can't. And once you stop trying to strong-arm your way into being productive, healthy, focused, or whatever it is you think you're supposed to be, you start becoming it. Quietly. Without drama. Here's something interesting. In 2020, a research review in the Journal of Positive Psychology emphasized the value of self-alignment over self-regulation. Meaning? Instead of constantly managing yourself, it's more effective to understand yourself. To design your behaviors around your natural quirks, not in spite of them. Reverse psychology works because it lets you do just that. It says, okay brain, you want to resist? Fine. Let's use that. Let's redirect the rebellion instead of trying to shut it down. You might find this surprising. In improvisational comedy training, actors are taught to say yes and to every suggestion, even the dumb or ridiculous ones. Why? Because resisting kills momentum. But accepting, and then gently guiding? That builds flow. You can do the same with your self-discipline. Instead of yelling "no" at your own excuses, say yes and yes, I'm tired, and I can do 5 minutes. Yes, I'd rather scroll TikTok, and I can drink water while I do it. Yes, this feels dumb, and I'll try it anyway. You're not denying your resistance. You're dancing with it. A long-standing controversy surrounds the idea of whether discipline should be rigid or adaptive. Should we force ourselves into routines, or build systems that flex with our emotions? Reverse psychology leans toward the latter. It says, adapt. Don't dominate. Here's the truth: you will always have lazy days. You will always have cravings, distractions, and urges to give up. That's not a flaw. That's the software. But you can code around it. You've learned how to shift from must to maybe. From don't mess this up to go ahead, mess it up. From I need to care to let's pretend we don't care and see what happens. That shift isn't weakness. It's mastery. Because true mastery isn't about control, it's about relationship. You build a relationship with your mind the way you'd build one with a friend. With humor. With patience. With a little mischief. So let's review what you now know. When discipline fails, resistance is often the culprit, not laziness. Your brain hates being told what to do, even by you. Reverse psychology invites your rebellion to work with your goals, not against them. You can trick yourself into motion by pretending not to care, giving permission to fail, and lowering the stakes. Even lazy you responds to soft nudges better than pressure. You can turn boring tasks into challenges. You can build habits backwards. You can plan in reverse, baiting your future self instead of demanding performance. And when it stops working? That's okay. You just pause, reset, and find another playful way back in. Because this whole thing, it's not about being perfect. It's about building a life you can actually live inside. One where self-discipline doesn't feel like punishment, but like self-respect. One where effort doesn't feel like a war, but like a kind of weird, sleepy teamwork between all your inner selves. So let go of the old scripts. The barking voices in your head. The guilt-coded lists and all-or-nothing thinking. You're allowed to work on yourself without working against yourself. That's real mastery. And now, let's slow everything down. You've absorbed a lot. It's time to let it all settle. So now, you rest. There's no goal left tonight. No lesson to memorize. No system to install. Let your breath fall into its own rhythm, softer now. No fixing. No rushing. No pressure to remember anything. All these ideas, these little reversals and tricks, they're here if you ever want them. No urgency. No expectations. They'll be waiting quietly, like keys in your pocket. You can reach for them when the time feels right. You might find, as the days pass, that something has shifted. Not loudly, but gently. A little more ease in your effort. A little less fear of failure. A bit more mischief in how you show up for yourself. That's enough. That's more than enough. Picture yourself floating just above your day. Not removed, not distant, just weightless. Like the heaviness of needing to be better has slipped off your shoulders for a while. Let yourself drift, not away from life, but back into it. Softly. You are not broken. You never were. You are not behind. You never were. You're simply dancing with the way your own mind moves. Sometimes that dance is awkward. Sometimes it's joyful. Sometimes it's just a nap. Whatever it is, it belongs. It's yours. So tonight, in this stillness, feel how quiet it can be when you're not pushing. Just listening. Just breathing. Just being. We're done now. You've done enough. Let yourself sleep.